Hello and welcome back to another build video, and today we are showing a melee build, and I picked Brr-Zerker and Stabbomancer as my two classes, and we are using from the Shadows action skill, but if you want to, you can use Dreadwind as well. And the main focus for this build is obviously melee, but we want to focus a lot on status damage as well, and the two main focus elements is going to be Frost and Lightning. For the skill trees in the Stabbomancer tree, we have increased melee damage here, also have increased melee attack speed. We have some status effect damage and status effect duration. And this is one of the most important skills for this build. So whenever you apply a status effect, you deal increased damage from all sources. And we're gonna apply a lot of status effects all the time. You also want to have this one, so this is a kill skill, and the next melee attack is a guaranteed critical hit, which is always going to be useful for us since we're using a melee build. I also went for Contagion, and this is to spread our status effects and actually apply new status effects. You also want to have a chemical agent, and it makes our melee critical hits apply a random status effect. So as you can see, it's going to be a lot of status effects going on. And for the Berserker tree, we want to increase our melee damage and enrage duration. We also want to increase our frost damage. And Icebreaker make us do more damage to slowed enemies, and every enemy is going to be slowed all the time, so as many points in this one as possible. The Old Ways is also very useful for us. We're going to get a bonus damage and damage reduction the closer we are to our enemies. And since we are a melee, we are going to be close all the time. And I went with Cold Snap to increase our frost efficiency. Then we have some more melee attack speed here, and this is probably the best skill in the build. And whenever we do melee damage, we have a 20% chance to release a Frost Nova that deals frost ability damage to nearby enemies. And once you get this to proc, it's going to be a lot of damage. So the more points in here, the better. I've only been able to get one from the skill tree, but if you find a class mod with more points into Blast Shield, that's gonna equal more damage for you. And for the weapons, I'm using a Fatebreaker, and this is a frost one, so we benefit a lot from the Brr-Zerker skill tree. And this is a very unique melee weapon. So melee attacks create 3 lightning projectiles that restores your shield equal to 100% of the damage you dealt. So we're basically going to be full on shield all the time. And then we have Echo. So melee attacks deal 10% of all non-melee damage dealt by the Fatemaker over the last 10 seconds as bonus damage. And when we are swinging around our melee weapon, we want to have a live wire equipped, because the chain lightning effect from the live wire is applying to our melee weapon. So we're going to have a lot of status effects going on in this build, and it's going to benefit a lot with live wire. And the actual chain lightning of the live wire does more damage if you have less bullets left in your mag. So in the gameplay very soon you will see me run around with 1 bullet all the time, and that's just to increase the damage of the actual chain lightning of this weapon. And the enchantment we have here is on spell cast, increase lightning damage by 30% for 5 seconds. And for the rare occasions when we can't melee our enemies, I choose to use a Spriggan. This is a really strong SMG weapon. And I also have a Delusion equipped, and you will see in the gameplay very soon why. But basically when we kill bosses, I use a Buffmeister, and we want to apply the soaked effect somehow. And with the Delusion we can do that, but during actual mobbing I'm not using a Buffmeister, I'm using a Tidebreaker, so I will get into that very soon. And for my armor I'm using this specific one, and we have a all damage dealt here. We have regenerates 2.1% missing health per second. The gun critical hit chance I would have preferred something different, but we gotta make use of what we have. And after taking non-status effect damage, we apply a fire status effect to ourselves. So we increase our movement speed and we leave a fire trail after for 3 seconds. And while this effect is active, damage dealt is increased by movement speed. And we're gonna have quite a lot of movement speed in general since we're using Stabbomancer. And yeah, we're gonna have a good benefit from this class mod in this build. And for my rings, I went for as much melee damage as possible. So here we have melee damage, and we also have melee critical hit damage. And if you use the Dreadwind action skill, you have ability critical hit damage here as well. And this ring is dealing damage to a boss, increases effects by 100% for a moderate amount of time. And for my second ring, we have more melee damage, we have melee critical hit damage. We also have SMG critical hit damage for the rare occasions when we have to shoot with the Spriggan. And this is while ward is not full, effects are increased by 100%. And I would definitely prefer when ward is full instead, but yeah, this is what I have. And for my necklace, we have frost damage, and we have some Brr-Zerker power, and we have some all damage dealt as well. And upon entering Save Your Soul, the Fatebreaker guns are reloaded and deal 30% bonus fire damage, but Save Your Soul duration depletes 50% faster. So this is a personal preference. You can go with something else, but I like the frost damage and the all damage dealt rolls. That's why I picked this one. And for my shield, we have a hammer and anvil. And this is a very unique shield, so when you take damage while ward is full, we summon a hammer that seeks out enemies and dealing melee damage and knocking them back. We also have a 10% increase to maximum health, and I've actually seen this hammer hit for like 25k. It's crazy. And the enchantment I went for is on action skill start, increase melee damage by 40% for 10 seconds. And for the spells, I'm using a Tidebreaker for mobbing, and this applies the soaked effect. So they take increased damage from lightning and frost, which is our two main status effect focuses with this build. And the enchantment I went for is after casting a spell, your gun and melee attacks have a 30% increased critical hit chance for a short duration. And the spell I'm using during boss fights is a Buffmeister, and this is a dark magic one for some survivability. And it has bonk, so it affects our melee damage. And if you use the Dreadwind, you have Ka-Chow as well, so it's going to be double up for the benefits. Another good option for spells during boss fights is a Sigil, and this is a self-cast, so you actually block all the projectiles that's incoming because you create like a big shield around you, and you also increase your damage by 20%, and you heal for 8% of your health every second once you stand inside it. For the hero points, I went with as much crit damage and status damage as possible. And the rest of the points are personal preference, but I went with some skill cooldown. Right now, we're gonna take a look at some gameplay.
This will be over before you can regret it. Worms won't go on.